When a policeman helps a family of bears across the road, he notices that one of the cubs is struggling. He does something incredible to help the cub, but it turns out to only be the beginning of a dramatic rescue. When the Carroll Police Department in New Hampshire began to receive phone calls from concerned members of the public, they knew they needed to take swift action. A mother bear and her 4 cubs were blocking the road close to the popular Brettonwood ski resort, and traffic was piling up. Animal incidents were fairly common in the area, so Carroll residents were pretty patient with these matters, but for the safety of the bears, they needed to move on. When the police arrived at the scene, a long queue of traffic had built up. Everyone was being patient and understanding, concerned for the welfare of the bears. But the police knew they needed to act diligently to keep everyone safe. The mother bear was pacing back and forth across the road, and 3 confused cubs were following her. However, a 4th cub was struggling to keep up. The mother was becoming more distressed by the minute, and there was every chance that in her heightened state she could turn aggressive. Trooper Thomas Owens stepped out of his patrol car to get a better look at what was happening. He assumed he'd just be able to guide the mother bear and her cubs towards the forest in a straightforward manner, but it was now clear that this wouldn't be a simple job. The 4th cub had grown tired and was now sitting down in the middle of the road. It was clearly much weaker than the others and was struggling to keep up with its siblings. The mother bear became even more distressed because she didn't know how to save her baby. She tried nudging the small cub, urging it to stand up, but the tiny animal just didn't have the energy. Trooper Owens prayed that the mother's coaxing would be successful. If she could just get the cubs off the road, then they would be guided into the safety of the forest. The mother frantically glanced around to check on her other 3 cubs, aware that every second they spent on the road put them in more danger. It wasn't a situation she wanted her family in. The mother bear had a tough decision to make. Protect the 3 healthy cubs or try to save the weak cub? Unfortunately, there was only one answer. With one big nudge, the mother bear once again tried to move the weak cub. But it was no use. The poor thing didn't have the energy to walk with its family. Reluctantly, the mother bear turned away and gathered up her 3 other babies. With one last look at the tiny cub sitting in the middle of the road, she led her remaining 3 babies into the forest, abandoning the weak cub in the danger of the road. Trooper Owen's heart broke. He knew the mother bear didn't have a choice. Saving her 3 healthy cubs was the right thing to do. She couldn't put the whole family in danger, but the tiny cub was now all alone. Trooper Owens had had lots of training for wildlife encounters, but he was more than aware of how dangerous black bears could be. Despite this, he knew he needed to act fast to help the abandoned cub. There was every chance the mother bear could return in one last attempt to save her baby. Everyone in the area knew that female black bears were extremely protective of their young. If they thought their baby was being hurt, they wouldn't think twice about lashing out. Trooper Owens knew that leaving the cub hadn't been an easy decision for her. He also knew he would have to move quickly to carry out the plan that had formed in his head. Without a second thought, Trooper Owens dashed out into the road and scooped up the tiny bear. He cradled the weak animal in his arms as it let out a distressed cry, turning his head towards his chest to soften his calls. The last thing he needed was for the mother bear to pick up on the cries and run out of the forest. The next few moments passed by in a blur, and Trooper Owens solely focused on making it back to the car. When he slammed the patrol car door shut, he breathed a sigh of relief. His heart was pounding and his body was shaking from the adrenaline, but he'd rescued the cub. Now, from the safety of his car, he could see that this tiny bear was much smaller than its siblings. It was no wonder it had struggled to keep up. It was clear that the cub needed some help, so Trooper Owens and the other officers agreed that the best thing for it was to take it to the New Hampshire Fish and Game Rehab Center. There was no way it could survive on its own, but with help from the rehab center, there was a chance it might get strong enough to eventually be released back into the wild. However, there was another surprise waiting for the Carroll Police Department. Shortly after the cub had been dropped off at the rehab center, more calls started coming in that another cub had been spotted on the side of the road where the first one had been rescued. This time, the police teamed up with the New Hampshire Fish and Game Rehab Center to carry out the rescue. Reports said that the bear wasn't on the road, but people in the community were concerned that it was on its own, and that given the location it might belong to the litter that had caused problems earlier in the day. Once again, Trooper Owens and the other officers headed out to Bretton Woods. They blocked off the road to prevent traffic from coming through the area while they searched for the second cub. Eventually, the small animal was spotted lying near some overgrowth on the side of the road. Officers were shocked to see that this cub was even smaller and weaker than the one they'd rescued earlier in the day. Staff from the rehab center were on hand to rescue the cub. As they worked, they explained to Trooper Owens that a mother bear having a litter of 5 cubs was extremely unusual. Bears normally only have 2 to 3 cubs at one time, so the fact that this mother had 5 was probably the reason that 2 of them had turned out to be the runts. The mother bear would have found it very hard to properly care for all 5 babies. Back at the rehab center, the 2 bear siblings were reunited. They were pretty healthy for their age, but they were slightly malnourished and dehydrated. It was evident that they hadn't been eating as much as their siblings. The staff made sure that the cubs got plenty of food and rest, and in time they got much stronger. They monitored their progress closely and were happy to report that the 2 bears were displaying both a playful demeanor and some predatory instincts. Day after day, the staff started hiding food inside the enclosure they lived in, so they could improve their sense of smell and their hunting abilities. After a few weeks, the time came to assess whether they could be released into the wild. They were not strong enough to survive, but the staff was worried that they'd grown too used to humans to be left alone. However, the staff at the rehab center determined that the siblings were just the same as any other bears their age now, and that they would be able to fend for themselves. They'd grown much bigger and stronger, and releasing them would allow them to thrive. The rehab center took the bears back to the forest and released them, staying back to watch as they wandered up into the trees together. Meanwhile, the mother bear had also been spotted with her 3 cubs, while the 2 runts had been recovering. The family seemed to be doing well, and the 3 remaining cubs were clearly very well looked after. The story had gained a lot of attention due to the incredible double rescue of the cubs, and many people were hoping for good updates. The Carroll Police Department shared with the community that all the bears were now doing well. As for Trooper Owens, he often looked out for bears when he was in the area of Bretton Woods. Whenever he spotted a bear roaming around, he couldn't help but wonder if it might have been one of the cubs he'd saved. Now it's over to you. What would you have done in Trooper Owens' position? Have you ever been forced to sit in a car while a wild animal crossed the road? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.